happy to be here. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about our work in Central America. The name of this presentation is Manage Soils to Manage Water, how we're restoring soil health to improve productivity and resilience of rain-fed smallholder production systems. The programs we're talking about today, we refer to as water smart agriculture. The programs we're going to look at today are all in Central America. As Shannon just mentioned, my name is Keough. I work in El Salvador in a program we refer to as RAICES, but it's Agricultural Landscape Restoration Initiative. Also is Andrés and Marie, and hopefully we'll get a chance to have some discussion at the end of this presentation that includes the full team. All the programs we'll talk about today are carried out through Catholic Relief Services, CRS, with financial support from the Howard G. Buffett Foundation. So a little bit of context. The WSA program works throughout the Central America dry corridor, where agricultural soils are highly degraded from poor management, such as slash and burn. 74% of agricultural soils are believed to be degraded, highly degraded. The region is highly vulnerable to climate variability. The farmers that we work with depend on rainfall systems, or rain-fed systems, excuse me, and erratic rainfall throughout the region makes these systems vulnerable to crop loss in primary and staple crops. Throughout the region, about 80 million people are affected by food insecurity. So this makes this a critical region to support improved farm productivity and sustainable practices. To address these issues, our approach with water smart agriculture is to restore degraded soils, improving productivity and drought resilience. By restoring soils, we can increase green water availability. Green water is the water available for plants in the soil for plant production. Degraded soils store less green water and dry out faster during periods without rain, whereas healthy soils infiltrate and retain more green water, which means that crops will be less impacted by periods without rain, with overall productivity of the system improved. Increasing soil cover and improving soil health also increases water infiltration and reduces runoff and soil erosion. How we do this, we have a set of core practices. The specific practices and application of WSA can vary across the region, depending on the local context and the crop type we're working in. However, we have this set of core practices where we promote minimum soil movement or no tillage, crop residue retention and permanent cover. This is stubble management, residual management, integrated soil fertility management through the 4Rs approach, which we'll talk about a little bit more in the next slide, and also promoting crop diversification, live cover and cover crops to increase that biomass and increase the live root in the system. One of these core practices that WSA promotes throughout the region is improving soil fertility management through the 4Rs approach. Fertilizer, a major investment for farmers, especially with rising costs in nitrogen-based fertilizers around the world. Working with farmers to understand their soil needs and applying the 4Rs as the right source or formula, the right amount, the right time, and the right location or right application. When combined with conservation practices, we see increased yields, reduced cost, and improvements in soil health and water quality. So what does this look like on the ground in the field? Here's an image of hillside corn applying WSA practices. This is in a system in El Salvador. You see no-till contour planting. We have permanent cover and incorporating cover crops. We're also incorporating live barriers to retain soil on the slope. Another example, some more imagery from the field. This is WSA practices, an aerial shot comparing WSA with a conventional farm system. We can see a farm with 4R fertilization management, greener, lusher. This also has cover crops integrated and improved density and stubble management. We also have incorporation of live barriers on the slope. And when we compare that with the red box here, cornfield with traditional or conventional practices, see the difference in lots of bare soil and also what appears to be a less productive system. One more example here from a coffee farm. On the left, we see a coffee farm with pretty much 100% ground cover in the system, compared to on the right, coffee farm without ground cover. On the right, this farm is much more vulnerable to high levels of erosion and runoff. And when these practices are applied throughout a watershed, they can generate water benefits, including improved recharge to streams and aquifers in the region. So talk a little bit about some of the evidence that we've been compiling on the effectiveness and impact of these practices throughout the region. Since 2016, CRS has been monitoring the impacts of these practices using side-by-side comparison plots, measuring soil health, productivity, and cost indicators. Here we can see on the image here, side by side with a conventional system on the right, a system on the left applying cover crops. And most critically, for farmers, we've observed increases in yields over the 4-year study with WSA plots. Yields have gone up following rainfall patterns. WSA yields have been consistently higher, you see in the green line as compared to the yellow line. Consistently higher over time. And as farmers improve and fine-tune the WSA management over multiple years of implementing WSA, the yield response continues to increase. In 2019, the last bar here on the right, despite relatively poor rainfall, WSA yields consistently were higher than comparison. Reaching 3.5 tons per hectare versus 2.5 in the comparison, which is about a 40% increase. We see similar improvements and increases in bean production with 42% increase in 2019. Using WSA practices, smallholders are getting closer to reaching what is considered the rainfall to yield potential, which in this region we're 2,000 kilograms per hectare, which we consider to be the minimum requirements for a farmer family to be able to have a profitable farm system. To put some of these values into context, the average family in Central America needs 1 ton of corn per year to meet minimum food requirements. This is a major challenge for farmers who may be farming on less than 1 hectare. So as I was just mentioning, we established critical yield thresholds as targets across our programs. This can change a little bit over in different countries based on local context, but a minimum target of 2 tons per hectare for farm families to escape food insecurity. So we see the importance of WSA in 2018 specifically, which was a drought year. 2018, we saw an El Nino significantly lower rainfall, particularly in critical moments of corn production in late June and early July. This resulted in conventional farmers not meeting this yield threshold. With WSA practices, we see average yields were able to reach and exceed yield thresholds even in a drought year, which shows WSA's potential to improve climate resilience and food security in the region. Yield improvements are also translating into greater incomes. The average total income for corn and bean systems has doubled based on this research throughout WSA systems. These changes in soil health also translated into greater soil moisture retention. In 2018, as I was just mentioning, we experienced a severe drought. The map here shows average July rainfall compared to 2018. 2018 on the bottom here, and average precipitation on the top. Some areas during this year went 20 days without rain during the primary growing period, which is, well, in this case, it was mid to late July into August. It's typical that our systems will have about 7 days without rain during this period, but this was an extended drought. The drought was our first opportunity to really test WSA performance under extreme conditions. Soil health and crop residue retention in WSA plots was key for retaining soil moisture during the drought in the middle of the growing season, after initial rains in June left the soil saturated. Under these drought conditions, WSA plots had on average 26% more soil water, and corn yields this year were on average 39% higher than comparison plots. In 2023, we had another opportunity to test this, the impact on retaining soil moisture. 2023 was also an El Nino year that experienced a delay in the growing season, and also an extended mid-season dry period lasting up to 16 days. This chart is testing soil moisture over a 10-day dry period in El Salvador, where we see that WSA practices maintain near optimal soil levels for multiple days longer than traditional practices, and that by applying WSA practices, crops were less likely to enter into critical humidity levels during extended agricultural drought. We're still gathering our data from 2023 productivity, but we're seeing that WSA supported farmers experience less crop loss than conventional farmers during this extreme period. Another key indicator we've been looking at is soil organic carbon. It takes several years of intensive restoration efforts, including soil fertility management, increasing biomass, minimizing soil disturbance, and maintaining continuous soil cover with crop residue or cover crops to begin to build soil organic carbon. But our trials in Nicaragua compared WSA systems with conventional systems with tillage, no crop residue, and or cover crops. What we see is that within 4 years of conversion from conventional to WSA, there's an average increase of 0.4% or 4 tons per hectare more soil organic carbon. We see a huge potential for soil restoration to contribute to both climate change and adaptation and mitigation by sequestering carbon through these systems. And really, it's just the amount of biomass that we're working with in comparison to the conventional crops that just leave, that create this opportunity. So we're seeing these benefits not only on the farm level, but also on the landscape level. In CRS El Salvador, we've established erosion plots that estimate that WSA practices can increase rainwater infiltration by 1,000 cubic meters per hectare per year. So when applied at a landscape level, WSA contributes to recharge of aquifers that supply communities and provide water for irrigation. So the way we did this study was we created 3 side-by-side comparisons. On the left, you have water smart agricultural practices, in permanent cover crops, improved density, and 4R. Here on the middle, you have traditional agriculture, starting with bare soil and just corn, and then a control of bare soil. And you can see we collected data after each rain event, and this was after 1 rain event. We see no runoff or erosion in the water smart agriculture plot. 1 barrel full of erosion or runoff with sediment load in the traditional agriculture, and bare soil, this actually is 3, and I believe there's runoffs here, so this is actually more. And we gathered that data. I think we have now over 3 years of data after every rain event on rainwater runoff, infiltration, and soil erosion in El Salvador. So speaking of landscapes, in 2018, we started our program called the Raíces program, which is the program that I work on, which is applying WSA practices on the landscape scale. Rice's program runs from 2018 and will run through 2025 at the end of next year. To date, we're working with over 5,000 farmers and over 4,500 hectares. Rice is not only building a network of farmers, but also creating a network of partners and local actors. Thanks to these efforts, it's been possible to establish innovation and grow WSA practice throughout a territory. When we apply WSA practices across a landscape, we can create multiple co-benefits for ecosystem services. These co-benefits include protecting and restoring recharge areas, protecting stream banks, capturing soil carbon and above ground carbon, maintaining ecological flows in tributaries and rivers, and reducing the risk of flash flood and landslides on steep slopes. The way that we work to expand and scale WSA across a landscape is through applying an extension strategy, or our approach is to create a robust network of extensionists and farm promoters or local champions in their communities. And the way that we do this is by working with local actors and establishing centers for shared learning. All of the extensions that we work with and technicians are trained on the farms where promoters and local champions live and interact. Learn by interacting with farmers to understand the problems that they face in the fields. The learning materials are always in contextually appropriate and in the appropriate language. And the practices and technologies are validated and modified based on farmers' response. Farmers provide feedback, and this feedback creates our research agenda and generates the questions that we want to test in the field. The way this looks kind of schematically is it's in a horizontal approach opposed to a top-down approach of shared learning, creating clusters of promoters or champion farmers that share knowledge and lessons in their communities. And then going back a little bit to the individual level. So what this looks like for individuals, we see farmers like Liliana Belloso, who began applying WSA practices in 2020 with dramatic decreases in her cost over 3 years and increases in her yield for corn production between 2020 and 2022. And it's these champion farmers that are sharing their experiences and growing the network throughout their communities, which is causing impact and spread across the landscape. One more quick example from the field is Carlos Agreda, who also since 2019 has been applying WSA practices. Seeing 2020 had increases in his cost. A lot of that's due to major increases in fertilizer and farm input costs in 2020, but started to see those real decreases in 2021 and real increases in 2022. And that's mainly due to Carlos deciding to invest in higher yield hybrid seed after being convinced that there's more potential for returns when applying these systems. So one quote from Carlos is that he's an old farmer, but he's willing to adapt to change when he feels that he has the support from technicians and extensionists and sees results on his farm. So that's a little bit about WSA and the Raíces program. Now I'm going to pass this to Andrés, who's going to tell us a little bit about an exciting program that's just now starting up in Guatemala. So go ahead, Andrés.
Thank you, Adam. Another initiative that we just launched 6 months ago is the Horizons Initiative that aims to regenerate the agricultural landscape in the Guatemalan Western Highlands, just in the borderland with Mexico. This is a very diverse region in terms of our ecology, but also in terms of social and cultural aspects. And the Horizons Initiative was born inspired by the Raíces El Salvador initiative that Adam showed us before. And we want to leverage the experience and the lessons learned that have allowed us to scale the WSA practices in a more comprehensive way. Please, next slide, Adam. And well, the initiative Horizons will be working in 70 municipalities, all of them in the Guatemalan border with Mexico. And these municipalities are characterized by a great ecological, economic, social, political, and cultural diversity. So there is an important challenge here to scale the regenerative agricultural practices, but also in strengthening the governance structures and in engaging youth into activities that allow them to develop and that allow them to meet their expectations for life. At the same time, they can contribute to the landscape management and to ensure the soil and natural resource sustainable management. Please, the next slide, Adam. And well, the Horizons initiative considers four main objectives. The first one is the scaling up of the WSA practices using the market system development as a driver. We want to ensure that the incentive for implement regenerative agricultural practices is that there is a more attractive remuneration and income from the economic activities related to the agricultural livelihoods. The second objective is rejuvenate the landscape through positive youth development, and we want to strengthen the leadership, the technical, the entrepreneurial skills for youth, focusing on vulnerable groups as women and indigenous people. The third one is to strengthen the governance structures for landscape management based on a pluralistic vision that includes not only the governmental institution, but also the private sector and the civil society. And finally, a constant through the 10 years of the initiative will be the search of new technologies and innovation to keep pace with scientific and technological advance, which are also reflected in the sustainable natural resource management practices. And for CRS, this is a unique opportunity because we have the possibility to think in the long term. It is not common to have 10 years to build or to start processes that aspire to deeper transformation. So the aspiration of WSA is that small-scale farmers achieve prosperity, but this prosperity is from the ground up. They will start regenerating the soil horizons, but they will regenerate their economic, social, and political horizons too. And this is the Horizons Initiative in Guatemala, and time is yours, Adam. Thank you.
Thanks, Andres. I couldn't find the mute button. So we're going to start closing this out, but really, we're really happy to be here with Soils for Society. And one of the reasons that we wanted to present this work is to share the results and the impact, but also to recognize that we still have a lot of questions that we want to answer. And we really would like to be part of this network of academics and other practitioners that we can be sharing experiences and learning, and invite others to come down and use the work that we've done and the data that we've collected to help us to answer other questions that can help us to improve our work across the territory or adapt our work to other regions. So I put some general questions here that we have, but really would like to open this up and put our contacts here for others in the space to come down and see the work that we've done as kind of a sandbox for learning and for sharing and for research. So, how can we better quantify these impacts across the landscape? How can we support farmers that demonstrate, or how can we demonstrate the resiliency of this work in face of climate change? What are kind of the underlying conditions for a successful extension network, and what are the impacts on the broader landscape? So these are all questions, and we have lots more, and we'd love to hear what your questions are and see how the work that we've done here in the region can help us create kind of a shared learning experience. So thank you all very much for your time. Thank you, Shannon, for opening up this space for us. And we have, I believe, some time for question and answers.